Hey everyone, welcome to the Blazing Faith Podcast. I'm Josh, and Brittany and I put out a video this past week talking about how do we heal from hurt. So if you've been hurt, how do you heal from that hurt? And probably the greatest 5 words that were said in that entire video, I think the whole video was great, but if you were looking for the best 5 words that were said, was when Brittany said the words, "Don't get stuck in bitterness." I think that's 5 words. I'm not really sure. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But don't get stuck in bitterness. This is a huge thing. This is so important. And we put this video out, and it was really just kind of like some life lessons, some wise ways. How do we heal from being hurt? How do we heal from being offended? And what I wanted to do was to follow up on that video to biblically kind of back that up of what does this look like in the scripture of, hey, is it biblical to be offended? Is it not biblical to be offended? How do I not have bitterness? How do I not get stuck in bitterness? So that's what I wanted to follow up with today. I've heard it said before when we're talking about bitterness that when you have bitterness in your life, it's like you swallowing poison hoping that the other person dies. Like you're going to take something into your body hoping that it kills somebody else. And in reality, when you have bitterness, the only person that it kills is actually you. I've also heard bitterness referred to as this unfair fight where you're the only one who's getting to throw punches in your mind. You're thinking of these great comments of, man, I'm going to say this to that person, or I should have said this to that person. And you're bitter towards that person. And you're in this fight and you're the only one who's throwing punches. But it turns out that it's not really fair because they can't fight back. So you always win. I don't know. All I know is that bitterness is not a good thing. And like Brittany said, don't get stuck in bitterness. Now, in that video, we discussed this idea that you can be hurt and you can be offended, but we need to know the difference between the two. And really what I want to focus on is being offended, because when you're offended, that's probably the easier of the two to heal from. When you're hurt, that's deep. That's in your soul. You're deeply hurt. But when you're offended, you can just kind of change your emotion. And here's what I know from the Bible. That we would see that Jesus' disciples would actually come up to Jesus and say, hey, you offended the Pharisees by what you said. So we know that from the Bible that sometimes it's okay to actually offend people. Now, don't take that as a way or a reason to be going around offending people and go, hey, the Blazing Faith Podcast said I could because Jesus did it. The reason that Jesus actually offended the Pharisees was because he was speaking the truth. So how do I heal from being offended? Well, the Bible actually gives us a really great verse. Paul writes it in the book of Ephesians chapter 4. And this is how he says kind of to not be offended, how you can live your life in a way where you're not offended by things. And he says this, Ephesians 4 verse 31, "Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God and Christ forgave you." Your soul has to eat. Like I gotta eat. As a person, I gotta eat. And I like to eat like way too much. But my soul has to eat. And so I can put whatever I want to into my soul. I can feed it love. I can feed it, being tender-hearted. I can feed it mercy. I can feed it grace. Or I can feed it bitterness. And I can feed it anger. And I can feed it wrath. And what Paul's saying is you need to make sure that you feed your soul something that's good. Don't feed it bitterness, feed it grace, feed it love. Be compassionate towards other people. This is how you can live your life without having bitterness in your life, is to feed it something that's good. Feed it something that's from the Spirit. Here's what's going to happen. If you don't live your life this way, if you feed it things that are anger, and if you feed it things that are unhealthy, bitterness is going to boil up with inside of you, and you're eventually, it's not going to be a good thing. It's going to erupt, and it's not a healthy thing. So you have to feed it something healthy. When we look in the Bible, we look at a person in the Old Testament by the name of Joseph. He had every reason to be bitter. He was sold into slavery by his brothers. He was thrown into a pit. They told his dad that he got eaten by wild animals. Joseph had every reason in the world to say, man, I'm bitter, and I have a reason to be bitter. But guess what? Joseph wasn't bitter towards his brothers. In fact, at the end of the story, we actually see that Joseph would actually show grace to his brothers. We see this with Jesus. Joseph is a foreshadowing of Jesus. Jesus had every reason to be bitter towards us. Jesus went to the cross. He died on the cross. He shed his blood for us. And for what? For us to take advantage of Jesus, for us to take advantage of his love, for us to take advantage of his mercy. Jesus wasn't bitter towards us. Jesus actually showed us love. Jesus showed us grace by giving us something that we didn't deserve. And that's my encouragement for you. If you've been hurt, if you've been offended, if you have bitterness in your life, feed your heart, feed your soul something that it needs. Feed it love, feed it grace, feed it mercy, and stop feeding it anger, stop feeding it wrath. This is the only way that you're ever going to heal from being bitter. Blazing Faith, I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Your support means so much to me. I love you.